changing the story and making it better in a very open light for children. I think that changing the heart and mind of how my dad operates and how he thinks is a big thing for me. I also speak to people like Ellie Barnes. I don't know if some of you know her. Ellie Barnes is an amazing woman, and Sue Sanders. Schools are out, educate and celebrate, because it's not just about the children back home, because there are children here who are of Ghanaian parents. So when I can speak to her and say, actually, have you thought about this and have you thought about that? She might feed that into what she teaches in her curriculum. So there are different ways of changing things, but for me, it's about my dad. Because if my dad can go out there and speak about, yeah, my daughter didn't accept the MBE because she is like that, but because he still won't really say the word lesbian. That's like, I want him to say lesbian, but he won't say it. But that's a little bit too far. But yeah, it's a change there. Thank you.
I mean, my answer to the question is I'm personally not that concerned about whether the church grows in numbers or not. What I want is the church to be reflective of what God is. I think God loves everyone. I think God loves people for who they are, and God loves gay people not in spite of them being gay, but because they're gay, because that's how they're beautifully and marvellously made. So if the church isn't reflecting God's love for sexual minorities, then the church is doing something wrong. And I believe when the church is doing something wrong, we need to try and change it. That's why I'm working for this. As it happens, I'd like to say that my congregation, a very healthy congregation in East London. I mean, the churches, there's often this narrative about the churches are declining. London, the churches are growing. I have a very vibrant congregation. We've been very blessed to actually also have a congregation there for some time of black gay Africans who are meeting, feels visited, beautiful group, and people have been through so many traumas, and when you go into a group like that and then people are worshipping together, you just, the sense of love, the sense of healing is so beautiful, and I think, God, this is gospel, this is what God is all about. But the other thing is the acceptance and the welcome from the majority, most people in the congregation, and a lot of old people, who've grown up with more conservative views, and what changes people is the relationships that they make within the church community. And then they realise, when we're confident to speak as a church about we're a church that is, welcoming of gay people, got the rainbow flag flying in our church and all these things, then people start to become part of the narrative. This is okay, this is good. We celebrate. We love Jide, we love, these different people in the church, and we want that to be part of who we are. So I think that's the thing. We want the church to reflect God's love for people, and that's what we're trying to do with this movement.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention to everyone that I believe there's currently a petition on change.org to get trans issues included in compulsory GP training. So if everyone wants to sign that, then maybe things can improve in that direction.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Can we just wind it up now and call you first?
Steve and the rest of the panel really want to. We talked a lot about conservative Christianity. I turned to Christianity when I was 18. I became a Christian. I became a union rep 3 years later, and I've been on a long journey wrestling with what the scriptures tell me and what my trade union faith tells me. Two contradictory things in those rights. And I still read my scriptures every day. So I know the Leviticus passage you're talking about. I've got loads of questions, but I'll put them down to one. I suppose, given 2,000 years of interpreting the Bible in a certain way for many Christians, do conservatism have a right to believe what they believe, and should they be facing prosecution, not persecution, prosecution for their faith? Or should we be recognising and respecting their faith and their interpretation of the scriptures that they believe?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say that we've not had 2,000 years of interpreting the scriptures in a certain way. some of these negative attitudes about applying scriptures to sexual minorities are quite modern. They're quite modern ways in which we've interpreted the Bible. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, actually our modern concepts of sexuality are quite recent, like in the last 200 years. So we've not had 2,000 years of the Bible being interpreted the same way. Actually, if you look at the history of biblical interpretation, you discover that some of the ways in which these texts are applied to sexual minorities is relatively recent. But going back in terms of the other question, should people be persecuted for what they believe? Well, I don't think they should. And I stand for religious freedom. I stand for freedom of thought. You know, I don't want people to have hatred in their hearts, but I don't want the state to prosecute people for thinking things if they disagree with me. I don't think people should have the right to incite violence. So for me, that is the line in the sand, where people might, then face prosecution. But I do think that people have got the right to hold views which may be contrary to what other people think. Now, interesting, this right is very much under threat at the moment with the government's extremism bill, counter-extremism bill, which is actually seeking to eradicate the difference between violent extremism and extremism. And that's something we should be so concerned about, actually, in terms of protecting freedom of thought and freedom of expression. And it could actually be quite troubling for people within the trade union movement as well. So I do absolutely stand up for people to express what they believe. I do not stand up for people encouraging people or doing violence to others. But I also believe that the way to change people's hearts and minds is through education. I don't want to force anyone to think differently from me, but I don't either want to be in a church where I'm told that my views are not valid.
Right, thank you very much, guys. And can I just again, please extend very thank you to these guys for coming here.
Yeah,
Oh, the booklets are here if anybody wants to pick one up.
Freedom of expression, Sammy, we need to get on board
How was the weekend?